There's a moment, a critical split-second choice you face when you know something others don't, when you see the flaw in their logic, the hole in their plan, the mistake they're about to make, and in that moment, the average person does what feels helpful. They speak up. Actually, you're wrong about this. Let me explain why. That's not going to work because you're missing something important here. It sounds intelligent, generous, even necessary. But to the truly strategic mind, it's the moment you reveal your biggest weakness. Because the second you correct someone, you teach them your thought process. And in mental warfare, giving away your advantage is suicide. This is the brutal truth most people never learn. The one who speaks first shows their hand. The one who stays quiet keeps their power. Let's destroy the first illusion. Sharing your intelligence rarely makes people respect it. What it does is give them your blueprint. Because when you explain why they're wrong, you're not just correcting them. You're showing them exactly how your mind works. You're revealing your information sources, your reasoning process, your blind spots. Even if you're right, you've just armed them with everything they need to outmaneuver you next time. Think about it. When you point out someone's mistake in a meeting, what really happens? Sure, they might thank you, but they also just learned your standards, your attention to detail, exactly what you notice and what you don't. You think you're being helpful, but you've actually just shown them your defensive strategy. And smart people? They file that information away, because only the weak give away their advantage for free. The truly intelligent mind operates differently. It watches, it calculates, it lets others make their mistakes while quietly adjusting its own position. Because every error someone else makes is information. Every flaw they reveal is leverage. And when you stay quiet, something powerful happens. They start filling in the blanks about what you might be thinking. They assume you must know something they don't. Your silence becomes more intimidating than any correction ever could. Most people correct others because they want to be seen as smart. They believe if they just demonstrate their knowledge enough, explain enough, show their expertise enough, they'll be respected. But that belief comes from ego, not strategy. You don't want recognition. You want advantage. Recognition is for performers. Advantage is for winners. And advantage doesn't come from being understood. It comes from being underestimated while knowing exactly what everyone else is thinking. So when someone makes a flawed argument, reveals bad judgment, shows their ignorance, and you immediately jump in to enlighten them, you've already lost. Because now you're teaching. Now you're exposing your thought process. Now you've put your intelligence on display instead of using it as a weapon. Think of the most dangerous people you've ever encountered. Not the loudest, not the ones who always had to be right. The ones who watched everything and said almost nothing. The ones who made you wonder what they were thinking just by the way they listened. The ones who, when they finally did speak, said something so precise it ended the entire discussion. Those people understood something fundamental. He who reveals least controls most. When you don't correct people immediately, they get uncomfortable. They start second-guessing their own statements. They look around for validation and realize you're not giving them any clues about whether they're right or wrong. Suddenly, they're the ones explaining more, trying harder, revealing more of their thinking. And that's how you flip the dynamic. You let their need to be validated expose everything while you learn their entire playbook. Let's go deeper. You're in a strategy session. Someone proposes an approach that you immediately see is flawed. Maybe they're missing a key factor. Maybe their timeline is unrealistic. Maybe they haven't thought through the consequences. What do most people do? They lean forward, they interrupt, they explain why it won't work. They think they're saving the project, but what they're really doing is showing everyone in the room exactly how they think, their risk assessment process, their priorities, their concerns, their expertise. The strategic mind sits back, takes notes, lets the flawed plan get discussed, debated, maybe even approved, because they know something everyone else missed. When that plan fails, and it will, they'll be the one person who saw it coming, and they'll have learned something valuable about everyone else's judgment in the process. More importantly, when they do finally speak up, it won't be to correct, it'll be to redirect, to offer an alternative that just happens to avoid all the problems they saw from the beginning. Now they look like a genius, not because they proved someone wrong, but because they guided everyone toward what was right. Here's the coldest move of all. Sometimes you don't just stay quiet about other people's mistakes. You let them teach you their weaknesses while pretending to learn from their strength. Someone gives you advice that you know is terrible. Instead of correcting them, you ask questions. Tell me more about that approach. How did you come to that conclusion? What made you think of it that way? What happens? They explain more. They reveal their entire thought process. They show you exactly where their reasoning breaks down. And you just learned how to predict their future decisions. You didn't waste energy correcting them. You invested energy in understanding how their mind works. And that understanding is worth more than being right in any single conversation. There's a moment when silence becomes strategic intelligence. Not just staying quiet, but staying quiet while actively collecting data. That's when the tables turn completely. They thought they were teaching you. Now they're exposing themselves to you. And you just became something far more dangerous than smart. You became unpredictable. The psychology behind this runs deeper than most people realize. When you correct someone, you're operating from their frame. You're accepting their premise that the truth needs to be immediately established. But the strategic mind operates from a different frame entirely. Truth is less important than positioning. Being right is less valuable than being advantaged. So instead of fighting in the court of immediate correctness, you let others waste their energy on small victories, while you position yourself for larger ones. Let's say you're in a social situation. Someone makes a statement that's factually wrong, maybe about current events, history, or something in your area of expertise. The average person feels compelled to correct them. Actually, that's not quite right. The real story is, and they launch into an explanation, but the strategic approach is different. You don't correct, you explore. That's interesting. Where did you hear that? What makes you think that's the case? Really? I hadn't heard that perspective. Now they're not just wrong, they're explaining how they became wrong. And you're learning about their information sources, their reasoning patterns, their susceptibility to certain types of misinformation. That's intelligence gathering, not ego management. And the information you gather is worth far more than the momentary satisfaction of being right. Here's what happens when you consistently choose strategic silence over immediate correction. People start assuming you know more than you're saying. Your occasional comments carry more weight because they're rare. When you finally do offer an opinion or correction, people listen differently. Because you've established yourself as someone who speaks only when it matters. But more importantly, you've been learning while everyone else has been performing. You know how they think, how they process information, what biases they carry, what mistakes they're likely to make. And that knowledge gives you something more valuable than respect. It gives you predictive power. The final level is this. Don't just stay quiet about their mistakes. Stay quiet about your advantages. Let them underestimate your preparation, your connections, your understanding of the situation, because the person who knows more than they reveal has a permanent edge over the person who reveals more than they know. Most people think intelligence is about demonstrating what you know, but true strategic intelligence is about learning what others don't realize they're showing you. When you stop correcting and start collecting, you don't just become smarter, you become dangerous, because you see everyone's patterns while they can't see yours. And once you have that advantage, you don't need to prove how smart you are. You just need to be smarter than they think you are. If this shifted something in how you think about conversations, save it. Share it with someone who always has to be the smartest person in the room. And remember this, the goal isn't to be right more often. The goal is to be strategic more consistently. When you stop showing your intelligence and start using it as a weapon, that's when real power begins.